You know, life has a way of surprising you when you least expect it. For Emma, a 32-year-old woman living in the suburbs of Chicago, everything seemed perfect, or at least close enough to it. She had built a life many would envy. A charming house with white shutters, a steady job she loved, and most importantly, a husband who looked like he'd stepped straight out of one of those romantic dramas everyone binges on Netflix. His name was David, handsome, charismatic, and always impeccably dressed. To the outside world, they were the picture-perfect couple. But as we all know, appearances can be deceiving. Emma wasn't naive. She knew marriage wasn't all roses and candlelit dinners. She worked hard to keep their relationship strong, balancing her demanding job with the responsibilities of home life. Every morning, she'd pack David's lunch with little handwritten notes tucked inside, reminding him how much she loved him. Every evening, she'd listen attentively as he recounted his day. She thought they were happy. She thought they were solid. But lately, something had shifted. It started subtly, so subtle that Emma almost didn't notice it at first. David began coming home later than usual, blaming work deadlines or traffic jams. He stopped texting her during the day like he used to. Those sweet, thinking of you messages were replaced by silence. When she'd ask about his day over dinner, his answers were short and vague, like he couldn't be bothered to share anymore. And then there were the phone calls, the ones he wouldn't answer when she was around, his phone screen lighting up with names she didn't recognize. Emma tried to brush it off at first. Maybe he was just stressed? Work had been demanding lately. She knew that much. Still, there was this nagging feeling in the pit of her stomach, a quiet voice whispering that something wasn't right. The moment that changed everything. It was a Saturday morning when Emma's world tilted on its axis. Not dramatically, but with a quiet certainty that left no room for denial. She was watering the flowers in their front yard, a ritual she found oddly therapeutic, when Mrs. Caldwell from next door shuffled over with her little terrier tugging at its leash. Mrs. Caldwell was one of those neighbors who always seemed to know everyone's business, whether you wanted her to or not. "Emma," she said in that conspiratorial tone people use when they're about to drop a bombshell. "I've been meaning to ask, who's that young woman I keep seeing at your house during the week? Pretty thing, dark hair, always dressed up real nice." Emma froze mid-spritz, her heart skipping a beat. "I'm sorry, what?" she managed to say, her voice tight. "Oh, I just assumed she was a friend of yours," Mrs. Caldwell continued casually, oblivious to Emma's growing discomfort. "She's been here quite a few times recently, always around lunchtime." Emma felt like the ground had shifted beneath her feet. A young woman? At her house? During lunchtime? She forced a smile and muttered something about not knowing who Mrs. Caldwell was talking about before retreating inside. Her mind raced as she sat on the edge of their bed later that day, staring blankly at the wall. Could it be true? Was David bringing someone into their home, their sanctuary, while she was at work? The thought made her stomach churn. But Emma wasn't one to jump to conclusions without proof. If there was one thing she prided herself on, it was her ability to stay calm under pressure, even when her heart felt like it was being squeezed in a vice grip. Taking action. That night, as David slept soundly beside her, Emma made up her mind. She needed answers. Not vague excuses or dismissive shrugs, but real answers. The next morning brought clarity and action instead of hesitation. Emma drove to the nearest electronics store and bought herself a small surveillance camera, the kind designed to blend seamlessly into its surroundings, and installed it discreetly in their living room later that afternoon behind a stack of books on the shelf. "I just need to know," she whispered to herself as she adjusted the angle of the camera one last time. The following week felt like an eternity as Emma went about her daily routine with an air of forced normalcy. Every morning before leaving for work, she'd glance at the bookshelf where the camera sat hidden and wonder what secrets it might uncover while she was away. And then it happened. The revelation. One evening after dinner, David had retreated upstairs early, claiming he had emails to catch up on. Emma sat alone in the living room with her laptop open in front of her. Her hands trembled slightly as she clicked on the folder containing footage from earlier that day. At first glance, everything seemed normal. The empty living room bathed in sunlight streaming through the windows, their dog curled up on the couch napping peacefully. But then, there she was. A woman Emma didn't recognize walked into view. A striking brunette wearing heels and carrying a designer handbag slung casually over one shoulder. She moved confidently through the room like she belonged there, like this wasn't her first time stepping foot in Emma's home. Seconds later, David appeared on screen, his face lighting up with an expression Emma hadn't seen in months. Pure joy mixed with something else, something intimate. Emma felt her chest tighten as she watched them laugh together over coffee at her kitchen table, the same table where she and David had shared countless meals and memories over the years. A new beginning. But instead of breaking down or retreating into despair, Emma chose resolve over tears. Betrayal would not define her story, it would fuel it. The next morning marked a turning point for Emma, not just as a wife, but as an individual reclaiming control over her life. She confronted David calmly, yet firmly after presenting him with undeniable evidence from the surveillance footage. His excuses crumbled under the weight of truth, revealing not only his betrayal, but also his insecurities masked by charm all these years. Emma packed her bags and left their home, not out of anger, but out of clarity, choosing freedom over false security. Months later, Emma found herself thriving in ways she'd never imagined, pursuing passions she'd long neglected and forming genuine connections untainted by deceit. Her story didn't end with revenge or reconciliation, but with growth, a testament to resilience and self-worth that transcended betrayal itself. Revised Story, Part 2, Discovery Through the Camera. There's a peculiar kind of silence that grips a room when you're on the brink of uncovering the truth. It's dense, almost suffocating, as though the air itself has been replaced by tension and dread. That was exactly how Emma felt as she sat on her couch, laptop perched on her knees, staring at the folder containing footage from the hidden camera she had installed just days earlier. Her fingers hovered over the trackpad, trembling with hesitation, yet driven by an unrelenting need to know what had been happening in her home while she was away. At first, everything seemed ordinary. The recordings showed an empty living room bathed in soft sunlight, their dog stretched out lazily on the couch, occasionally wagging its tail in its sleep. Emma exhaled a small sigh of relief. Perhaps Mrs. Caldwell had been mistaken. Maybe there wasn't another woman after all. But then, as the footage continued to play, her heart dropped. A figure appeared on the screen, a woman Emma didn't recognize. She was striking, with dark hair cascading over her shoulders and a confident stride that suggested she knew exactly where she was going. There was no hesitation in her movements. This wasn't someone visiting for the first time. She moved through Emma's home with ease, as though she belonged there. Emma froze, her breath caught in her throat as she watched the stranger settle into her living room. The woman placed a designer handbag on the coffee table and casually began scrolling through her phone, exuding an air of familiarity that made Emma's stomach churn. Moments later, David entered the frame, and what Emma saw next made her blood run cold. David smiled at the woman, a smile Emma hadn't seen in months. It wasn't a polite or perfunctory smile. It was warm, intimate, familiar. He leaned down and kissed her cheek with a tenderness that made Emma's skin crawl. The footage unfolded like a cruel film. Emma couldn't pause or stop watching. She saw David and this woman sit together at their kitchen table, the same table where Emma had shared countless meals and memories with him over the years. They laughed over coffee, their heads leaning close together as though sharing secrets meant only for them. Emma's chest tightened with every passing second. This wasn't just a casual visit. This woman wasn't some distant acquaintance dropping by for tea. She stayed for hours, long enough for David to cook lunch for them both, long enough for them to move from the kitchen to the couch, where they sat side by side, their hands brushing against each other like teenagers sneaking forbidden moments of affection. Emma felt like she was drowning in a sea of emotions, rage clashing against sorrow, betrayal pulling her under, while disbelief kept her afloat just long enough to keep watching. How could he do this? How could he bring her into their home, their sanctuary, while Emma was out working to support their life together? And yet, Emma didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, she closed her laptop and sat there in silence, staring at the blank screen as though it might offer answers to questions she didn't even know how to articulate. She could have confronted David right then, stormed upstairs and demanded an explanation for what she had just seen. But something held her back, a quiet voice deep within whispering that this wasn't over yet, that there was more to uncover before she made her move. So Emma waited. The next day brought more footage and more heartbreak. The same woman returned during Emma's lunch break while David was home alone again. This time, they skipped coffee and small talk entirely. They went straight upstairs to the bedroom, the room where Emma had slept beside David for years, where they had whispered dreams and promises into each other's ears under the cover of darkness. Emma watched as they disappeared from view on the camera feed, leaving only silence behind, a silence that spoke louder than any words ever could. By now, anger had fully replaced sorrow in Emma's heart. It burned inside her like wildfire, uncontrollable and consuming everything in its path. But still, she didn't act impulsively. She knew better than to let emotions cloud her judgment when so much was at stake. Instead of confronting him immediately, Emma decided to keep gathering evidence, to build an airtight case against David that he couldn't deny or dismiss with excuses about work stress or misunderstandings. For days, weeks even, Emma continued watching those recordings unfold like chapters in a tragic novel she wished she could close forever but couldn't bring herself to stop reading. Each time that woman walked through her front door, each time David greeted her with smiles and kisses meant only for lovers, each time they shared moments meant only for couples who trusted one another implicitly, Emma felt another piece of herself shatter into fragments too small ever to put back together again. But amidst all this pain came clarity, a realization that struck Emma like lightning during one particularly sleepless night. This wasn't just about David anymore. It wasn't just about his betrayal or lies or infidelity. This was about her, about reclaiming control over her life, about standing up against deceit not just for herself, but for anyone who had ever felt powerless against betrayal disguised as love. And so, Emma prepared herself, not just emotionally but practically, for what came next, confronting David head-on, armed not only with undeniable proof, but also with unwavering resolve fueled by weeks spent watching shadows dance across screens revealing truths too painful ever to forget. The story continues. Part 3: Confrontation and Liberation. There comes a moment when the weight of betrayal becomes too heavy to carry quietly, when silence shatters, and the truth erupts in a storm of anger and clarity. For Emma, that moment came on a Tuesday afternoon. She had spent weeks gathering evidence, each recording, each lie, stacking up like bricks in a wall between her and the man she once trusted with her entire heart. But today wasn't about watching shadows on a screen anymore. Today was about stepping into the light and letting the truth scorch everything it touched. Emma called in sick to work that morning, her voice calm as she fabricated a migraine. David, ever the picture of routine, had left for the office earlier, though Emma knew better. She waited until 11:30 a.m., opened the surveillance app on her phone, and braced herself for what she already knew she would find. The live feed loaded slowly, almost mockingly. And there it was, the woman's car parked in her driveway. Emma didn't remember much of the drive home. Her hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white as familiar streets blurred past her. When she pulled into the driveway, her breath came in shallow bursts. The front door was unlocked, a careless mistake or an arrogant assumption. She stepped inside silently, leaving her shoes at the door to muffle her movements. The house felt alien now, every creak of the floorboards a betrayal. From upstairs came muffled laughter, their laughter. Emma's chest tightened as she pulled out her phone and switched it to video mode. The bedroom door was slightly ajar. Through the crack, Emma saw them. David and the woman tangled in her sheets, their bodies entwined in a grotesque parody of intimacy. The sight made Emma's stomach churn, a horrifying distortion of everything she had built with him. For a moment, she stood frozen, recording it all. Then, with a strength she didn't know she possessed, Emma pushed the door open. The sound of the door slamming against the wall echoed like thunder. David shot upright, his face draining of color. The woman screamed, scrambling to cover herself with the comforter, Emma's comforter, the one they'd picked out together during a trip to Maine 2 summers ago. "What the hell, Emma?" David stammered, his voice cracking with panic. Emma didn't answer him. She kept the camera trained on them both, her voice cold and steady. "Say your names. Loud and clear. Are you insane? Stop recording," the woman shrieked, clutching at the sheets like they could shield her from Emma's fury. David leapt out of bed, fumbling for his pants. "Emma, please, let me explain." "Explain?" Emma's laugh was sharp enough to cut glass. Explain why you're in our bed with her? Explain why you've been lying to me for months? Go ahead, explain. He fumbled with his belt as if clothing himself could somehow restore his dignity. It's not what you think. Don't. Emma took a step forward, still holding up her phone like a weapon. Don't insult me again by pretending this isn't exactly what it looks like. I've watched you two for weeks. Every lunch date, every touch, every laugh. Her voice cracked, but didn't falter. You brought her into our home, into our bed. Her eyes burned with tears she refused to shed. Did you even bother washing the sheets afterward? The woman, now hastily dressed in a wrinkled blouse, tried to slip past Emma toward the door. But Emma blocked her path without hesitation, raising the camera higher. What's your name? Leave her alone. David snapped, his voice rising in desperation as he pulled on his shirt. No, Emma's gaze never left the woman's face. You wanted to be part of this? Then introduce yourself. The woman hesitated, glancing between Emma and David as if searching for an escape route. Finally, she muttered under her breath, Laura. Laura. Emma repeated slowly, tasting venom in every syllable. Tell me something. Laura, did he promise you this house? Did he tell you I didn't understand him? That we were drifting apart? Laura said nothing. Her silence was louder than any confession. David stepped forward with his hands raised in surrender. Emma, baby, we can fix this. I'll end it. I swear. Emma turned to him then, for the first time really looking at him since entering the room. The man who had once knelt before her on a beach at sunset and promised forever now stood before her stripped bare, not just physically but emotionally, a stranger with pleading eyes and trembling hands. Fix this. She gestured toward the bed, the rumpled sheets still warm from their betrayal. You broke us long before today. Laura seized that moment to bolt from the room, nearly tripping over herself as she fled down the stairs. David made a move to follow her, but Emma stepped into his path. Let her go, she said coldly. She's not your problem anymore. For what felt like an eternity, they stood there in silence, a decade of love and lies hanging heavy between them like smoke after a fire. Finally, Emma lowered her phone and spoke quietly but firmly. Pack your things and leave. I want you out by tonight. David's composure crumbled completely then. Emma, please don't do this. I love you, I love us. She flinched as though struck, but quickly steadied herself. Her voice was barely above a whisper when she replied, Love doesn't look like this. Then louder, get out. When he reached for her arm in desperation, she recoiled as though his touch burned her skin. Don't touch me, she said sharply. Not ever again. As Emma walked out of their bedroom, their former sanctuary, she didn't look back at him or at what they had destroyed together. She didn't need to. That image was already seared into her memory like a scar that would never fade. Downstairs in the living room, Emma sank onto the couch as adrenaline gave way to exhaustion and grief, a raw ache that settled deep into her bones. The house felt cavernous now. Every echo reminded her of what had been lost and what she had reclaimed. On the coffee table sat David's wedding band, forgotten in his rush to dress, a hollow symbol of promises long since broken. She picked it up and rolled it between her fingers. It felt lighter than it should have. Outside, Laura's car roared to life before speeding away down the street. Upstairs came muffled sounds of drawers slamming shut as David packed his things. And Emma? Emma sat perfectly still on that couch, the weight of everything crashing down around her. And yet, there was something else there too. Freedom. This wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. The story continues. Part 4. A bold decision. Sometimes, the hardest decisions aren't made in the heat of the moment, but in the quiet aftermath, when the chaos subsides and all that remains is the raw, unfiltered truth staring back at you. For Emma, that moment arrived the morning after she confronted David and Laura in her bedroom. The house was unnervingly silent. David had spent the night on the couch downstairs, his suitcase packed but untouched by the door. Emma hadn't slept. Instead, she had spent hours replaying their relationship in her mind. Their wedding day, late-night conversations, promises whispered under moonlight. And then, like a cruel interlude, the image of him and Laura tangled together in her bed. By sunrise, Emma knew what she had to do. The final confrontation. She descended the stairs slowly, her steps deliberate as she entered the living room. David sat hunched over on the couch, his head buried in his hands. When he looked up at her, his eyes were red and swollen. Whether from regret or fear of losing everything he had taken for granted, Emma couldn't tell. "Emma," he began, his voice hoarse and pleading. "Please, let me explain." She raised her hand to silence him. "No more lies, David. No more excuses." Her voice was calm but carried a sharp edge, a strength she hadn't realized she possessed until now. "I want you to listen carefully." David nodded hesitantly, his shoulders sagging under the weight of what was coming. "You didn't just cheat on me," Emma said, her words deliberate and cutting. "You betrayed me. You betrayed us. You brought her into our home, into my sanctuary, and destroyed everything we built together." "It was a mistake," he blurted out desperately. "I wasn't thinking." "Stop." Her voice sliced through his like a blade. "Don't insult me by calling it a mistake. Forgetting an anniversary is a mistake. What you did, that was a choice, a series of choices you made over and over again." David opened his mouth to respond, but froze when Emma reached for her phone and placed it on the coffee table between them. The screen lit up with paused footage from the hidden camera, the damning evidence, and David's face turned pale. "I have proof," she said simply. "Every lie you've told me for months. It's all here." David stared at the phone as though it were about to explode. "Emma, please don't do this." "Don't do what?" Emma shot back, her voice unwavering. "Don't hold you accountable? Don't make you face the consequences of your actions? You made this bed, literally, and now you're going to lie in it alone." David's composure shattered entirely. He fell to his knees before her, tears streaming down his face as he begged for forgiveness. "I'm sorry," he choked out. "I'll do anything, to fix this. Just tell me what to do." Emma looked down at him, her heart aching despite everything he had done. She had loved this man once, deeply and fiercely, and part of her still did. But love wasn't enough anymore. Not after this. "You can start by leaving," she said quietly but firmly. David's eyes widened in disbelief. "You don't mean that." "I do," Emma replied without hesitation, her voice steady even as tears threatened to spill from her own eyes. "I deserve better than this, better than you, and I won't spend another day pretending otherwise." For a moment, David didn't move, as though hoping she might change her mind if he stayed still long enough. But when Emma crossed her arms and stared him down with unwavering resolve, he finally stood up and walked toward the door without another word, reclaiming herself. As soon as David left, Emma let out a shaky breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. The silence that followed wasn't oppressive or empty, it was liberating. But Emma wasn't done yet. Later that day, she sat at her desk with her laptop open in front of her, fingers hovering over the keyboard as she debated whether or not to share her story publicly. Part of her worried about exposing such personal pain to strangers, but another part of her knew how important it was to speak up. She thought about all the others who might be suffering in silence, trapped in relationships built on lies because they were too afraid or ashamed to leave. And so she began typing. Emma didn't hold back as she recounted everything. David's subtle changes in behavior that first sparked suspicion, Mrs. Caldwell's offhand comment that planted doubt, the hidden camera footage that confirmed her fears, and finally, the confrontation that ended it all. She concluded with a message from deep within her heart. To anyone drowning in betrayal, you are not alone, and you are stronger than you think. Don't let anyone make you feel like your worth is tied to their loyalty or lack thereof. You deserve honesty, respect, and love without conditions or secrets. Within hours of hitting post, Emma's story went viral. Messages poured in from people all over the world, some sharing their own experiences with infidelity, others praising Emma for her courage, many offering words of support and solidarity. For the first time since discovering David's betrayal, Emma felt truly seen, not as a victim, but as a survivor. And while grief still lingered like shadows creeping into unguarded moments, memories of happier times with David flashing uninvited across her mind, Emma knew one thing for certain. She had made the right decision. This wasn't just an ending, it was a new beginning. The story continues. Part 5. A moving and meaningful ending. You know, life has a way of testing you in ways you never see coming. It throws you into the fire, burns away everything you thought you knew, and leaves you standing in the ashes wondering how you'll ever rebuild. But sometimes, the fire doesn't destroy you, it transforms you. That's exactly what happened to Emma. After the betrayal, heartbreak, and confrontation that shattered her world, she didn't just survive, she thrived. And her story? It didn't just inspire people, it changed lives. Emma's divorce was finalized on a crisp autumn morning. The courthouse was quiet, and the air outside carried the faint smell of fallen leaves. She stood tall as the judge read the decree, her hands steady and her gaze fixed ahead. Across from her sat David, the man who had once promised her forever but betrayed her in ways she could never forgive. His head was bowed, his shoulders slumped under the weight of shame. Emma didn't feel pity for him anymore. She felt liberated. The chains of his lies had finally been broken. Walking out of that courthouse, Emma felt a lightness she hadn't felt in years. The sky seemed brighter, the air fresher, as if the universe itself was celebrating her freedom. But Emma knew this wasn't the end of her journey. It was only the beginning. She started small at first, reclaiming parts of herself that she had lost during her marriage. She signed up for a pottery class she'd always dreamed of taking but never found time for. She began volunteering at a local women's shelter, sharing her story with others who had experienced betrayal and emotional abuse. It wasn't easy, opening up about her pain, but every time she spoke, she felt a little stronger. And then came the moment that changed everything. One evening, Emma sat at her kitchen table, the same table where David had once laughed with Laura, and opened her laptop. For a long time, she stared at the blank screen, unsure if she was ready to share her story with the world. But then, she typed out the words that had been sitting heavy in her heart. Betrayal doesn't define you, it empowers you. She wrote about everything. The subtle signs she ignored at first, the gut-wrenching discovery through the hidden camera footage, and the confrontation that ended her marriage but saved her soul. She didn't hold back. Her words were raw and unapologetic. She wrote about how betrayal isn't just an act. It's a theft of trust, dignity, and self-worth, and how reclaiming those things is an act of courage. When Emma hit post, she wasn't sure what to expect. Would people judge her? Call her weak for staying as long as she did? Or would they see the strength it took to walk away? The response was overwhelming. Within hours, Emma's post went viral. Thousands of comments flooded in, messages from strangers who shared their own stories of heartbreak and betrayal. People who thanked Emma for giving them hope and courage to stand up for themselves. Her inbox filled with messages from women and men who said they finally felt seen because of Emma's words. Her story became more than just a viral post. It became a movement. Emma was invited to speak at conferences about resilience and self-worth. She appeared on podcasts and talk shows where she shared her journey and encouraged others to reclaim their power after betrayal. Her words resonated deeply with people across all walks of life. Those who had been cheated on, lied to, or manipulated into believing they weren't enough. But Emma didn't stop there. She partnered with organizations that supported survivors of emotional abuse and infidelity, using her platform to raise awareness about toxic relationships and empower people to leave situations that no longer serve them. She launched a campaign called Know Your Worth, which provided resources for individuals seeking legal help or counseling after experiencing betrayal. Through it all, Emma remained grounded in one simple truth: betrayal doesn't deserve forgiveness, it deserves justice. Meanwhile, David's life took a very different turn. The hidden camera footage Emma had recorded during their marriage became evidence during their divorce proceedings, not as revenge, but as proof of his repeated infidelity and disregard for their vows. Word spread quickly about what he had done, not just to Emma but to their marriage itself, and his reputation crumbled under the weight of his actions. David lost more than his wife. He lost his career prospects and social standing. Friends distanced themselves from him. Colleagues whispered behind his back. Even Laura, the woman he had risked everything for, left him when she realized he wasn't worth sacrificing her own dignity over. For David, life became a shadow of what it once was, a constant reminder of what he had destroyed with his selfish choices. He spent years trying to rebuild his reputation, but found himself haunted by regret every step of the way. Emma hadn't sought revenge against him. Life had taken care of that on its own. And yet, Emma didn't waste time thinking about David anymore. He was part of her past, a chapter closed forever. Her focus was on building something beautiful out of the rubble he left behind. Emma's pottery class turned into an unexpected passion project, a metaphorical representation of her journey. She molded clay into bowls and vases that were imperfect, yet stunning in their flaws, just like herself. Each piece told a story, resilience shaped by fire, beauty born from brokenness. One day, while glazing a vase in soft shades of blue and gold, Emma smiled to herself, a quiet moment of peace amidst all she'd been through. She realized then that happiness wasn't something someone else could give you. It was something you created for yourself. Emma's story became more than just a tale of betrayal. It became a testament to strength, a reminder that even when life knocks you down so hard you can barely breathe, you have the power to rise again. Her message echoed across social media platforms. Don't let anyone steal your worth or silence your voice. Stand up for yourself, even when it feels impossible, and demand justice for what you deserve. To millions around the world who followed her journey online or heard her speak at events, Emma wasn't just an inspiration. She was proof that healing is possible, that even after betrayal leaves scars on your heart, those scars can become badges of honor. And so, Emma lived not just happily ever after, but boldly ever after, unapologetically reclaiming every part of herself that had been stolen by deceit while helping others do the same. Her story didn't end with heartbreak, it ended with triumph. Because sometimes, rising from ashes isn't just survival, it's transformation. The end.